The gifts of the Spirit, especially tongues, have often been attacked and mocked with false claims such as ceasing with the apostles or not being seen in modern times in the 19th century. However, church history shows the gift of tongues, along with all of the other gifts of the Spirit, have always existed. As early as the 1st and 2nd century, Irenaeus, a disciple of Polycarp, and Tertullian both witnessed and recorded in their writings many of the gifts of the Spirit. Irenaeus wrote, "In a like manner do we also hear many brethren in Christ who possess prophetic gifts, who through the Spirit speak all kinds of language and bring to light for the general benefit hidden things of men, and declare the mysteries of God, whom also the apostles turned spiritual." Next, in the 4th century, you see St. Augustine, who lived from 354 to 430, also wrote, "We still do what the apostles did when they laid hands on the Samaritans and called down the Holy Spirit on them by laying on of hands. It is expected that the new converts should speak with new tongues." As early as the 12th century, St. Hildegard, who was an uneducated woman who was very sickly and ill, was unable to be educated, often experienced the gifts of the Spirit, interpreting languages she had never learned, being able to translate them to her native language, along with experiencing dreams and visions and many of the other gifts. The 13th to the 16th century, there are many men recorded that went country to country speaking in tongues, and the natives of the land could understand them, even in mixed crowds of people. These three men are St. Vincent Ferrer, St. Francis Xavier, and St. Lucis Bertrand, who are said to be some of the fathers of the modern charismatic Catholic sect, which is not often seen. At the start of the Reformation, Martin Luther, who is recorded in his own sermons as possessing the gift of tongues and the gifts of the Spirit. In Sauer's History of the Christian Church, he states that Martin Luther was a prophet, an evangelist, a speaker in tongues, and an interpreter, in one person endowed with all the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Tongues in the same time period were also seen in France in two different groups, the Jansenites and the Savines. Historical accounts record that all ages experienced the phenomenon of tongues, and many were children as old as 9 or 10. The Anabaptist groups also experienced and taught on the gifts of the Spirit and faced severe persecution from followers of John Calvin, at oftentimes being accused of witchcraft, losing their lives for their beliefs. Other famous men of this time period, such as John Wesley and George Whitefield, also experienced speaking in tongues and the gifts of the Spirit, recording it in much of their writings and their sermons. During this time, shortly following, the Quakers in England experienced the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and spoke in tongues. The Quakers were followed in the 18th century by the Dutch Great Awakening, where manifestations of the Holy Spirit, much similar to what modern-day charismatics experience, were witnessed and recorded. In 1825, Edward Irving, a popular Presbyterian minister, experienced the gift of tongues and taught it to his followers, leading to him being ostracized by his peers, later converting to Catholicism and becoming one of the other followers of the sect of charismatic Catholics. During the campaigns of D.L. Moody, tongues and manifestations of the Holy Spirit were often recorded. At the close of the century, revival broke out in many countries. Historical accounts in 1875 from R.B. Swan writes that he and others spoke in tongues. In 1879, W.J. Walthall also receives the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And then from the early 1900s, we see tongues at Topeka, Kansas, the Azusa Street Revival, the Welsh Revival, and many other movements leading to today.